Welcome to HortTube, where we talk all things gardening. My name is Jim Putnam, and this is a Daruma Loropetalum. This is Daruma Loropetalum, a lower growing evergreen shrub. It's a dwarf loropetalum. It's a newer variety and has become very popular very quickly. Daruma Loropetalum is a dwarf loropetalum. It only reaches about 3 to 4 feet in height and 3 to 4 feet in width. When I first started in this business, all loropetalum got 25 feet tall very, very quickly. And now we're down to these, and there's even a couple that are almost flat to the ground now. But this variety's become very, very popular. It fits a lot of spaces where you have a 3-foot high windows. It's pretty much the only one that'll kind of come up right in that height range and still offer the flowers and the rich color. In terms of hardiness zones, everybody lists these 7 to 9. If you were going to tuck it up on a foundation, you could probably try these in 6B. Just know that if you get a winter that's, sub-zero, in all likelihood these are going to be hurt very, very badly. Daruma grows much slower than the old varieties of loropetalum. We might get 6 to 8 inches of growth out of these in a season if we're pushing them, fertilizing them in the spring and fertilizing them in the early summer. Loropetalum will pretty much all grow in sun or shade, but they'll be green in the shade and very thin and stretched, probably not flower very well in the sun. And the more sun, the better. You're going to get the best purple foliage, and the purple foliage contrasts with this interior green foliage and is very, very showy. In terms of usage for Daruma Loropetalum, this plant can be planted in mass and be very beautiful when it blooms in the spring and in the fall with those pink frilly flowers. It also looks good with something else that has like yellow foliage or chartreuse foliage with it. That looks nice, planted in a big group. This plant, since it only gets about 3 foot tall, perfect foundation plant. It could be used as a container plant probably in zone 8 or 9, and zone 6B or 7. Almost certainly it would be killed in the winter time if the roots froze solid for any length of time. Daruma Loropetalum blooms twice a season. They bloom on temperature change, so we'll see them bloom in May after they get a little bit of new growth in the early spring, and then again in the late summer or early fall. It's late summer now and they're starting to bud up now. It's a little pink frilly flower, contrasts really, really nicely with the purple and green foliage. In terms of planting Daruma Loropetalum, or really any loropetalum, not a lot to worry about really. This is probably a plant that you could put just directly in the ground without soil amendments. They're not really that picky in terms of under or over watering. Obviously everything can be overwatered if it's just a space that stays too wet all the time, but if it's reasonably dries out between rains, this plant could probably go in the ground without soil amendments. I always will mix in some pine bark soil conditioner if I have clay soils, and mix in some peat moss or cow manure or compost if I have sandier soils, and elevate these a little bit. Dig the hole like you're going to plant the whole put the whole plant flush with the ground, and then put some loose soil back in the bottom of that hole so that it ends up, when you set it in, it ends up sticking up about this much above the grade, maybe 2 inches. Pull your soil up to the edge of that and then lightly mulch. Don't cover anything on the bottom of this plant. And the big consideration with loropetalum when you're planting them is they're very fragile when they're this size. And so they're easy to break off. Never grab this plant and try to pull it out of the pot like this. Put it in your hand, flip it over, and pull the pot off above your head like this, and then flip it back over gently and set it in, and just be real careful. Once they get some size on them, they're quite a bit less fragile. In terms of watering loropetalum, they really don't need a lot of additional water once they become established. You might want to keep a real close eye on them for the first 6 months, give them extra water if it's abnormally dry, but it would almost have to be a drought situation once one of these are established to need additional water. Occasionally, if they get drought stressed, they're pretty good at telling you some of the interior foliage will turn yellow or orange and drop off and start shedding some leaves. If you see that happening, you can drag a water hose over to it. They recover from it very quickly. Anytime you need to control the height on loropetalum, they can be pruned. I don't do a lot of fall pruning on leafy evergreens because they don't do any more growing. And so they'll look like that the entire winter. And I think some of this outer foliage is protecting the interior of that plant, especially if you're in a colder climate for these, zone 6B or 7. You definitely wouldn't want to prune them that time of year. So I would wait until after they flower in the spring, and then if you need to cut them, you know, cut them 6 inches below where you want to keep them so that they have time to come out and have this kind of looser form to them. Keeping these growing is important because all the best foliage color is in the top 2 or 3 inches. So I'll fertilize these in the early spring with a slow release fertilizer, and then again in the early summer, just so all season long I have this purple foliage contrasting with that green interior foliage. In terms of insect or disease problems, there really aren't any on most of these Loropetalum. They rarely even get chewed on. Occasionally we'll see a leaf chewed on here or there. It seems like the insect tries it, doesn't like it, and moves on to the next thing. And pretty much all Loropetalum are deer proof. Rarely will you ever see deer mess with these. They could damage them though because they are a little brittle. So what are you waiting for? Even you can grow the low maintenance, purple foliage, evergreen, pink flowering, dwarf Daruma Loropetalum. Thank you for watching, and if this video was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Also comment below with any questions you have about Loropetalum. There's a lot of different varieties now, a lot of new varieties coming on the market that are 6 inches tall, and we still have the old-fashioned varieties that get 25 feet tall. So if you have any questions, ask away. Holly, have you laid there this entire filming? I think you're trying to be a star. It's probably going to work too.